Good evening. Evening, sound check. Okay. Welcome to the tutorial today. Just again an apology. Start. Feel very sick. I'm working from bed as we speak, so I might have to pause from time to time to drink water and for coughing and stuff when the need arises. So please just bear with me on that one. Yeah. So that's just that. We are doing part 2 of the theme we started in block 3, week 7, which is the conceptual clarity into sociology. And we are working with part number 2 of the theme. Just some food for thought there. It says, sociology a natural science or a social science? So today's session explore that briefly. Just think about, is it a social science or a natural science? Remember that last week we had started looking at the nature of the study and trying to rationalize what is the best way to think about or approach studying sociology, as the food for thought for last week was looking at how society influences the individual and how the individual influences society in return. So we're gonna build up on that and get some historical background on the study and then other things researching. So for starters, let's just think about requirements, of course, as always. Just a moment. Yeah. Session requirements. Remember, guys, this is a tutorial, it's not a performance. So from time to time, you'll be expected to put your marks and tell us what you think, what you and then doing something. So that you'll be expected to do that from time to time. Yeah, so that is just that. So make sure that for a smooth session to be conducted, make sure that you mute your mic when you're not talking. Interaction or action icons to communicate during the session. In case I ask, do you understand? Can we move? You just use those icons to stimulate your understanding at that moment. You are allowed to ask questions during the session. Engagement will be really appreciated. Again, you must never attend a tutorial without touching your readings at all. Remember that those readings that you got are the same readings. And since we're opening on the 11, means that you guys will be 3 weeks ahead of. Means you'll be halfway through the module by the time actually tutorials start. And you are urged to participate as much as possible. And then the other parties on the recording of the session are currently working on a tutors workshop so that we in a way orientate some of our tutors and reflect on our work. So some of the sessions will be like today's session, but with other sessions they will not be recorded. So you need to take notes during the session. So meaning that with today's session, as much as it's recorded, it's not recorded for the students, but it's recorded for reflection purposes. So some people are saying I am breaking. Can you just confirm, am I still breaking?
So Mbuyisa, you are breaking there and there.
Okay. So you'll alert me when that happens again.
All right.
And
Okay.
sorry, Say, I also can't
Yes.
see anything on the screen.
Please try leaving and rejoining the session. Okay. So yeah, I think that will take care of matters. If it doesn't, then it's fine. We might have to make you guys access the recording if necessary. For now, we just move on to next part, which is a part that requires your interaction. So we have a question there. What did you learn in part 1 of this theme? Let us hear. Did you guys learn in part 1 of this theme? So you can raise your hand or just unmute and speak. I'm gonna take at least 10 people. So tutorial was like 2 hours or so. Choose people that no hands from the attendance list here. Okay, so let's see who is the lucky one. Tabang Nkosi, what did you learn? As I can hear.
Hello?
Say you are cutting.
Speak, and the person,
Hello?
someone who is supposed to be speaking, you guys should be speaking. Tabang, yes.
Yes, hello? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. In part 1, I have learned that sociology is the scientific study of society and human behavior. And I have also learned about the sociological perspective, which means that seeing the general in the particular and seeing the strange in the familiar. And also about the sociological imagination, which is an awareness of the relationship between an individual and the wider society.
Okay. Thank you for that, Mr. Nkosi. That is, yeah, I'm surprised actually. That's a good one. Please repeat that statement. Seeing the
The sociological perspective.
yes.
It means seeing the general in the particular and seeing the strange in the familiar.
Yeah. So can we just note that down as it is, guys? Yeah. So that is the best way to explain it. As can we get Lungile?
I have learned that, okay, I was not present, I was partly present, but from what I've learned is that we must not look at sociology in an individual perspective, but look at the broader society.
Okay, beautiful. Tshegofatso, Khanyile.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I've learned that sociology is very complex because we're studying the behavior of people, and sometimes it can be hard to actually investigate that because we are also a factor in all of that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Let's get Zvivuya. Zvivuya.
Can you repeat?
There's nothing to repeat, Mr. We want to hear what you learned in part 1 of this theme. Let's hear.
Okay. I learned that in sociology, nothing is as it seems.
Man, what does that mean?
What can I say? You can see a woman wearing a red dress and you can have your own speculations, but they may be wrong.
What is important is how we apply sociological perspective in analyzing how that woman is dressed, right? So that's what we looked at. Thank you. Refilo. Refilo.
Hi, sir. Honey,
Yes. How are you?
I'm good. I learned that sociology is a study of human life, and yeah, so we basically don't have to position ourselves to. Okay, no, can I please start afresh?
No problem.
I learned that sociology is a study of human life. You basically have to have a sociological imagination in order for you to be a sociologist. You have to put yourself, like your personal life aside, and actually look at the life like in a broader scope. Like look at how people are living in order for you to fit in and understand why and how those people are living in like that kind of life, like to understand the social issues that are common in different parts of communities in different areas. That's what I understand.
Thank you for that. Renee. Mr. Rambau. Renee. Renee. Renee Rambau. Guys, let's be a happy family today. Let's not fight. Renee, talk or be removed. Okay, Nomvelo Dlamini. Nomvelo Dlamini. Guys, you are killing the vibes now. Okay, Ntobeko Ngiti. Okay, Mr. Matan.
Oh, Mr. Mbuisa, what I learned on that day is the sociologist who Comte, that is the one who came with the word sociology, the history of sociology per se. And I've also learned about social structures and the way we view things in the society is different from when or the way I view something is different from the way someone is viewing that same thing, meaning our perspective is different. That's what I learned on that day.
Thank you for that. So basically what we looked at in week 1 is exactly that. But one of the things we explored in a way an introduction to the nature of sociology. We looked at the importance of having a sense of objectivity when you're studying society. And before we looked at that, we explored how can you define sociology in a limited sense. So we also distinguish how is it different from psychology of education that you did in semester 1, and what makes it unique. And had a very lengthy conversation on the sociological perspective, looking at what is it and how can we actually use it to look at some of the burning issues in society, where we looked at the question, why do students protest? And we drew on some of sociological concepts. We're gonna continue that conversation, and what's this on Saturday's session when we look at the sociological imagination. Now, for today's session, we are again just going to finish our conversation on sociological perspectives. So now we look at what theoretical perspectives do we have? How can we actually define sociology in an extended definition sense? Because we looked at limited definitions last week. So we look at how do you define it in an extended sense. Look at a description of what is qualitative research and quantitative research, and how do they apply in sociology and how they are used. Then we'll again look at to draw from the two sessions. So that's exactly what we are going to look at. So let's, to recap, choose to limited definitions. And we say limited definition just gives us a shorter view of the subject matter rather that you're trying to study. And we define sociology as a study of human life, study of society, and quite a lengthy limited definition says sociology is a systematic study of human behavior, social interaction, social institutions, and society. So we looked at this last week, and we tried to actually extrapolate what this means, how can it be applied, and how do sociologists do what they do. So with this, I will say limited definitions are done. And you might be expected, by the way, to write an essay on defining sociology. So you need to know this. But in the essay, you'll be expected to give us an extended definition of what sociology is. So I think that's an aspect that we need to cover then today. Extended definition of what sociology is. Now, if we look at the slide that is here, so this is an extended definition of sociology. We say sociology is defined as the scientific study of human social interactions and the social forces which shape much of human being. Sociology studies the patterns, trends, and forms of collective and social action, and the social processes and structures in society which arise out of the way human beings act in the world. Now, that was quite a lot to actually capture. Now, let's break it down, and that's what we mean by extended definition. So it's you giving us a thorough description of whatever you study. So to break it down, so the first part says sociology is defined as the scientific study. What do we mean by it being a scientific study? We are saying that this form of knowledge, or this set of knowledge, is obtained by the use of specific methodologies. And what methodologies are those? And we use scientific processes, scientific methodologies to try and gather knowledge for the study. And in a way, we are saying the study follows certain scientific principles, such as, for example, in science, we choose to disregard people's morals and values and ethics, and focus on the objectivity of the knowledge. So that's exactly what we mean. Sociology is a scientific study. So in a way, we are saying that in how we approach the study employs the scientific methodology to try and gather the knowledge. Someone who is unmuted, the sounds that are coming are disruptive. Please just. And then again, to continue, it says it's a scientific study of human social interactions. So what are those human social interactions? So we start to think about how do people interact in a micro sense, in a small scale sense, and how they interact in a broader sense. So we look at the relationships in interaction between people. So and we call the small scale relationships, or those individualistic relationships, what is named a micro-sociology. So when we are looking at these small individual to individual relationships, we call it micro-sociology. And when we look at, in a way, a median sense, mid-range sense of relationships or interactions between people, we call that meso-sociology. And that studies groups or communities. So it moves from individuals to studying groups or communities. And we also look at the last sense, the larger scale of human interactions. And we call that macro sociology. And that studies national or global social processes of interactions. So that's what we mean by that. And again, it says the study looks at the social forces which shape much of human behavior. So we start looking at now what influences how humans interact in a small scale, how humans interact in individual to individual relationships. And we also think about what social forces in a society, in a community, interact with each other. And we have theoretical perspectives that help us to look at that. Again, we also look at what shapes how broader society in the global structure and from the small scale to the large scale, to the border scale, to try and understand the structuralization of society. So that's what we mean by that. And if you are asked to write an essay on this, giving an extended definition of sociology, you need to break this short quotation down into pieces to try and extrapolate what it actually means. And the next part is sociology studies the patterns, trends, and forms of collective social action. Now, before we continue, remember that I had tasked you to say every week as you are doing sociology, make a concept dictionary of some sort, where you note down all the words that start with the word social. So we have social action, social processes, social interactions, and so on. From this definition. Now, to explain now what this means. So in sociology, now it goes back to the example we looked at last week. So if you look at the background image from what you are seeing there in your screen, we talked about that picture briefly to say, what do we see from the picture? How do sociologists look at such a picture when they see? So you see that there are buildings, and you see that they differ in height and how they are structured and the building materials and so on. And that's actually what we look at in sociology, the different patterns that we can notice from the social environment to try and understand what seems to be common among what is more peculiar, what is more common across society, and what is least common across society, and what influences things being viewed as most important, famous, or and less famous. So that's what we think about. Study those patterns and trends. And again, now the purpose of studying those trends is to look at social actions. So we see how are the patterns and the trends influencing the social action of individuals in society and groups and broader society. So we categorize how people act across society, how they act across different structures in society, to try and see that we had last week of people holding their head. So that's exactly what we are looking at. To look at how do you, as a member of society, view the earth in an objective sense, to try and identify the relationships that exist between members of society. So that's what you do, guys, when you give us an extended definition of sociology. Now, just a key point for us to remember now is that we said that we referred to Erickson's quote last week. And I'll always remind you of this. It says the fact is that most sociologists regard their field as an approach rather than subject matter, which means that we do not look at society as this unflexible, stationary object that must be studied in a very strict manner. We are open to flexibility because, and that's what we mean by it being an approach. So we are open to using different approaches, studying society. And again, we in our use of different approaches, we apply a specific perspective. We're going to look at some of those theoretical perspectives in today's session briefly to try and look at it. So we look at society from a certain perspective rather than just this stationary body of knowledge. And the last part of his quote says, what differentiates us from other observers of the human, how we look at the world. So our eyes are focused in a flexible manner. Our intellectual reflexes are also tuned in a flexible manner. So, and we call that a specific imagination that we apply, and that sense of imagination, we call it sociological imagination. So if you did chapter 1 from C writing, you understand what we are looking at here. So we apply that kind of imagination, the sociological imagination. And since most of your colleagues have asserted to say the sociological imagination allows you to look at society beyond your personal experience, you take yourself in a way out of the picture and objectively look at how structure influences agents and how agents influence society as in the opposite sense. So we will again delve on this further. So that takes us to an important aspect really, that we also looked at last week. The screen is black. Okay, so it takes us to that question, and we asked, what is the sociological perspective? So we're just gonna help you recap, and then we'll apply this in a different way today. Let's just recap how we looked at last week. So can we just get some hands from you guys? Kane, how did we define the sociological perspective? Tabang, like you to again repeat your response. So let's maybe get 5 people to help us with this one. Your understanding, guys, of the sociological perspective, always two. Let's start. So guys, in this order, can you just listen to the order? You'll have Oluetu and Sonwabile, Ebuho, which is called Kazimir, Alizwa, and then we are gonna take Tapelo, the last one. Just want him to repeat what he had said earlier. Guys, in that order. Can speak. Yeah. So your understanding of the sociological perspective.
This is always here. So sociological perspective, the way I understand it, I think it is the common way that people have, or common belief that people have for something.
Thank you. Common belief that people have on something. Okay. The next one.
I think sociological perspective is how someone view the society, on how how they behave, you see, and the development that are happening in the society, and the development downgrade of the society.
Okay, thank you. Development of society. Okay, different levels. Talked about downgrading. Okay, next one. Can we save time? The next person go. Okay, can the person after the next person come?
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I understood or understand social perspective as to how one, suggesting an individual, is able to view something. And within that, we look at society as a whole. And we also, in close reference, look at the social ways and the patterns, as well as the social behavior that people have. So in one point of view, and then one other person looks at the social way of how one acts and behaves in another type of view. So that's how I understand social perspective.
Okay, thank you for that. So it's again flexibility in how we view different levels of society. Thank you, Mr. South. Tapelo, last one. Please repeat what you said earlier. Then, so just to sum it up.
Oh, I see sociological perspective is the way I view things and someone is viewing the same thing, but the way I view that particular thing is different the way that person is going to view that particular thing, because maybe we are influenced by the society we are living in, the different society that we are living in.
Thank you for that. Tabang, your famous quote.
The sociological perspective means seeing the general in the particular and seeing the strange in the familiar.
Yeah, so it's summed up. So that's exactly what it is. It's looking at, thank you for that, the interactions between how you think about general society in a generic sense, and how again you tend to say, if I zoom through society, as the animation is showing you there, if I zoom through society, this is what I will actually see and discern from it. And I think just recapping from on what we looked at last week. So we sort of analyzed pictures. So this is New York City, remember that, and people rushing to work in the morning. Those were some of the perspectives we got, and we asked you guys, what do you think the guy wearing an orange shirt is thinking or up to, what the red person was, the person the red t-shirt, as you can see in that small picture, and all of that. And we said, if you look at these individual people and trying to in a way find a generic sense or a generic view on their biography, and we are because but when you do that, you are trying to, in a way, make assumptions that may not be true about the person's biography. And you are, in this case, I'm saying that you are entitling your own views or perspectives about the person and attaching them on the individuals you are seeing. We are saying that the sociological perspective is not that. What the sociological perspective is exactly what the bigger picture is showing you there in that slide. So when you zoom out of New York City and try to look at the patterns that exist, the social interactions that exist thereof. For example, we determined that most of the cars are yellow, so it means the city is more or less accustomed to using public transport, as an example. So in that case, you are applying a generic view of something that is subjective in nature, and I'm saying it's subjective in nature because it's individuals in those cars doing whatever life or day-to-day events or practices they are doing. But as a sociologist, you neglect those day-to-day practices, and you try and look at society in a collective sense, in a generic sense, to try and determine how it works. So that's just the global perspective on it. And we came back home and we looked at Wits University as an example. So we analyzed this picture and we tried to say, we asked you, what do you think the lady in a black t-shirt is doing? The guy in a black tracksuit, some said they're probably late for class, some says probably after school. They are changing classes to different lectures and all of that. And that is just us again being subjective again. So we are looking at individuals and trying to give our own views of what they may be doing. And we are saying that that is not the sociological perspective. Rather, the sociological perspective is when we zoom out and look at how is Wits University as a whole structured, what patterns can we identify from it, and what conclusions can we then have as a result. So that is just, guys, what the sociological perspective is about. Now, this week, I'm just going to add now some theoretical view on it. So last week, it was just an intro to this, and we were being general about it. So this week, I just want us to now think about, in sociology, then in a theoretical sense, how do we what major theoretical perspectives do we look at, and what theories have we formed that we use in applying our sociological perspective. Now, remember that we had said society is structured in different ways. We talked about, when we are doing the extended definition, we said we have the micro sociological perspective, the meso and the macro sociological perspective. And those are the theoretical approaches that we looked at. So since applying a sociological perspective is viewing society in a certain way, we have like three major theories or three levels of analysis that we apply in looking at this. So in looking at general or macro society, we look at the structural functionalist perspective. We call it the structural functionalist perspective. And what does it look? What does it say, or what view does it have on society? It says society is composed of interrelated parts that work together to maintain stability within society. So, and it says the stability is threatened by a dysfunctional or X and institution. So this is, in a sense, saying that when we are looking at society in a micro sense, in a macro sense, in a global perspective, we are sort of just saying these are the general patterns that we can observe in society. And these patterns work interrelatedly to each other. And we tried now to discern what forms of interrelations can we draw from these, from society as a whole. So that's when we focus on something that, in a way, categorizes or puts people into groups in society, and we call that social institutions. So social institutions group people or classify people into groups, and we say now these social institutions work together, they work interrelated with each other in order for society to be stable, to be stabilized, to be in a state of equilibrium. So that's just an intro to it. We'll explore it in 2 weeks' time when we do the theoretical perspective. So in the macro sense, in the structural functionalist perspective, that's exactly what we look at. And then another perspective we look at is called, it's what we call conflict theory, or the conflict paradigm. And this is by Karl Marx. And if you did your readings in week 1, you might have came across this. And we say also this one is an example of a Marcos perspective, because it looks at broader society, and it's of the view that society is characterized by social inequality, and that's something that we really know, that in society we will always have some sort of inequality, and we say these inequalities can be used to try and understand how society is structured, and for us to better understand how people interact with each other. So it says that social life is a struggle for scarce resources, and then social arrangements benefit small groups at the expense of others. So in a way, it brings a sense of competition, or a sense of saying, in society, or rather for us to understand society, we need to acknowledge the fact that it will always be a struggle for survivor. And it brings us to what we call, we'll talk about who came up with this later on. I think Spencer calls this social Darwinism. So that's where the term survival of the fittest came from. So that conflict theory simply looks at that, how inequalities can be used to try and explain the structuralization of society. And then the last sense of things is in the micro sense, the small perspective. Remember, we said on that part, we look at individual to individual relations. And the view that we use for this one is called the symbolic interactionism perspective. And it's of the view that society is a sum of interactions of people and groups. So remember in maths, when we say the sum, we're looking at the addition of certain numbers, right? So in symbolic interactionism, we say that as much as we say there are broader perspectives that explain how society is structured, but we need to also acknowledge that it is individuals that lead to the formation of these broader institutions and systems and interactions thereof. And what this says is that behavior is learned in interactions with other people, which means the social patterns that we come across with are as a result of people interacting with each other. And in a way, you would say that it's somewhat connected to social psychology, because remember we said for behavior to be learned in psychology, it starts in the social, it starts in the intrapersonal before it becomes interpersonal. So that's exactly what symbolic interactionism says. It says people behave in certain ways in these broad institutions because of their small scale interactions with each other. And as a result, it says now, these behaviors in a way end up defining how people will generally behave in society. And what this view actually fights for is to say we also need to fight for acknowledging the involvement of individuals in how broader society turns out. And the best way to the best gaze at explaining this is through our use of the sociological imagination. So those are your sociological or rather perspective major theories or major approaches that we study and look at. A question that comes then is that how can we compare them with each other? So just to categorize things, né? Now, starting from the small scale perspective. So we say symbolic interactionism is best to use in explaining how individuals are structured in society. And we say that structuralism is explaining how groups of institutions are structured in society. In a way, how communities are structured in society. In a way, it serves as our meso or mid-range sociological perspective. And then we say that conflict theory is mainly on the global scale. It's mainly on the macro. So it looks at how broader society is structured. So functionalism can be a macro and a meso or mid-range sociological perspective or level of analysis. And conflict theory is only a macro sociological perspective, while symbolic interactionism is a small scale or micro sociological level of analysis. Now, here are the core questions that we look at in trying to compare the three perspectives. In structural functionalism, we ask the questions such as, what keeps society functioning smoothly? And just to give an answer to that, what keeps society functioning smoothly is it having a sense of equilibrium, it having a sense of stability. And we say that society needs to always have value consensus or equilibrium, a state of equilibrium for things to function smoothly, which means all your social institutions need to be in a state of equilibrium. And we say that when there is one sense of disequilibrium or dysfunction or defunction in that section of society, we are going to have other social institutions, other parts of society being affected. So that is what functionalism looks at. And the second question we answer is, what are the parts of society and how do they relate? And for that, looking at what are the parts of society, we are basically saying, what social institutions do you find in society? And we start categorizing them. We did the readings. If we did the readings, can we just name the social institutions? Let's start here. How many are they? How many social institutions do we have?
I think 5.
Yes, we have 5 social institutions. Can we name them? First one?
Educational institution.
Educational institution. Number 2?
Economy.
Economy. Number 3?
Labor.
Labor. Did someone say labor?
Politics.
Politics, yes, not labor. Next one.
Religion.
Pardon?
Religion.
Religion. Last one.
Family.
Family, yes. So those are your 5 institutions. Write it down somewhere. We have religion, education, economy, politics, and the family. So those are the 5 institutions. And we say that is exactly how society is structured. So structural functionalism studies how society is structured. And what do we look at when we are studying that? We look at how are these 5 social institutions interrelated with each other for the general smooth functioning of society. So that's what we look at. And the last question, what are the intended and unintended outcomes of an event? So we study now specific societal events. And the event that you're going to study this year is fees must fall, roads must fall. Ne? You'll be looking at what intended functions came out of fees must fall and roads must fall. What unintended functions came from fees must fall and roads must fall, and how do they assist us in understanding the structuralization of our social institutions? So that's what we look at in sociology, guys. From the structural functionalism or structural functionalist paradigm. And then when we look at now conflict theory, these are the questions we answer. How are wealth and power distributed in society? So it takes us to the famous Karl Marx's work, and he looks at the involvement, the role of the economy in how humans in society behave. And remember, in this one, we look at, in a way, the distribution of resources. And we say that the first contributor to how resources are distributed in society is the distribution of power. So who is wealthy and who is poor determines how much power does that person possess. So that's what Karl Marx makes us to just explore. And question number 2 says, how do people with wealth and power keep them? So we ask then, if you have the privilege of having wealth, how do you maintain your acquisition of this wealth? What methods do you employ in ensuring that you maintain your state of wealth? And that's where we look at the inequalities that result thereof. For example, in year of study 2, you'll be looking at, in sociology, you'll be looking at how Bantu education ensured that the white people that had wealth maintained their acquisition of wealth. So in the educational sense, we look at how does a person's acquisition or what's this of wealth influence how they exercise their power to people in society. So how do they, in the educational sense, how do they choose to use intellect or education to try and maintain their acquisition of state of being wealthy? So that's what we look at. And then question number 3, under conflict theory says, are there groups that get ahead and why? So we ask now, the levels of development, are the people that develop faster than others, and what makes them develop faster than others? Do we end up having a very huge gap between the rich and the poor as a result? And how do we address such issues as educators, for example? So that's what we look at. And then the last question, how are society's resources and opportunities divided? So takes us to fees must fall, roots must fall. So students not having access to fees was not affording fees in a way sort of inhibited their formal access to higher education. Remember from your teaching experience, formal access is having access to your institutions of formal learning. So because of high fees, some students were excluded from having formal access to education. And again, other unintended functions came up to say, even though we have formal access, but is the education or is the theories we are being taught still relevant to our society? So that's when we start talking about the decolonization of education, epistemic decolonization. So that's an aspect you're also gonna look at in the decolonization of sociology section. Yeah, so if you were following with us when we were doing TE, you will be fine for that section because we were introducing you to some of the stuff you're gonna do in sociology. Okay, so that is just all in conflict theory. And I hope we can see now how the different perspectives or levels of analysis can be applied and how they actually can be used to view society in different ways. And then when we look at the individual, these are the questions we ask. How do people co-create the society? So you'll notice that the other two perspectives were looking at general society. That's what we are looking at to say in the two views, to say how are the other two theories influencing how general society works, or rather what influence do they have in explaining how general society works? And you notice that we are not looking at individuals when in those two perspectives. While with symbolic interactionism, we start now looking at the contribution of individuals, the contributions of social agents to broader society. So we look at how society is created by, co-created rather by individual society. So that's what we think about. And question number 2, how does social interaction influence, create, and sustain human relationships? So we then now move on to say, how do these individuals interact with each other within these institutions in ways that ensure that we have a sustainable human relationships or human interactions happening within the institution. So we think about that. And again, the last one, do people change behavior from one setting to another? If so, why? So we ask, when goes back to literacy for senior FET teachers, when people become mobile, when they move across borders, when they move across different societies, do they change their behavior from one setting to another? And if they do, why do they change? And if can the person mute their mic? You're distracting me. And when you think about your social linguistic course, again, you look at what influence does language have in the interactions of people from one setting to another. So in week one, you looked at language as a social force with Mr. Pungayo to say, because of language, we have people behaving in certain ways, in certain contexts. So we look at how does language actually influence society as a result. And we are going to try to apply some, what's this, Ngungi's work in imagination when we get to the decolonization part. So I hope you understand the differences between the theoretical perspectives. Can you just highlight with a thumbs up if you are fine, we can move. Or if you have a question, you can, I'm open to taking that. Okay. Yes, we have a few thumbs up. Okay. Now, to sum this up, to sum this whole thing up, remember the question was, what is the sociological perspective? So the sociological perspective, put in words, is a sense or a state of intellectual gaze. It's an approach or a perspective or an intellectual reflect or an imagination that allows a sociologist to study society in the macro sense, and in the micro sense. So the sociological perspective allows you to study society in a global sense and in an individual to individual interaction sense. And that is what the sociological perspective is. And what influences the sociological perspective? It is influenced, these sociological perspectives are influenced by what we call social stratification. And what is social stratification? Social stratification is our hierarchy or hierarchical arrangement of large social groups based on their control over basic resources. So what ties all the perspectives together, what ties our understanding of sociology or our understanding of society is how we look at the arrangement of resources across society. And that's why conflict theory is the major macro perspective. And it is the major perspective simply because it explains how individuals get access to their resources, how inequalities in society sort of act as in a way, a social force of some sort that structures people in certain ways, structures how people behave in those particular areas. For example, you will know that if you look at the picture on the side with the houses, if you look at the differences between those two houses, you'll see that one is an example of a shanty town or a squatter camp. And that picture, by the way, is showing you what we call a third world city in the modern day. So we call it a third world city because we have the mixture of the modern city with informal settlements next to it. So shanty towns are informal settlements. So that's exactly what social stratification does. So we look at how are resources distributed. And after looking at how resources are distributed, we now start to notice what patterns can be observed from people that have least resources? What patterns can be observed from people that have more resources? If you look at the informal settlement in your left-hand side picture there, you'll see that the place is really dirty. If you look at it, very dirty. While if you look at this city, the place is clean and beautiful. So you see now a pattern that is being noticed. So we see that people that live in these beautiful cities, in a way, are more clean, are more into environmental cleanliness than people that live in shanty towns, because the conditions there, even the building material, it's made of waste material, so it's not even suitable for human occupation. So you start seeing those patterns, and we say that social structural inequalities are mostly often based on class, race, gender, age, and other attributes. And those other attributes will be the society's history in influencing that. And what does this now mean for these individuals that come from the informal settlements? You'll find that when they are given an opportunity to get an education, they make sure that they use it to the fullest sense. And then takes us to the picture on your left. You'll see that the student doesn't have accommodation. Remember, we talked about in the previous session. The student doesn't have accommodation. So as a result, the student sleeps on campus in tables or chairs there in order for them to attend contact lectures on the next day. So you see that they are more hungry for education, while you wouldn't expect such from a student that is from that beautiful side of the city. So you see that in a way, social stratification or the hierarchical arrangement of people in society sort of informs how they behave, to the extent that when these students are inhibited equal rights to an education, what do? They take it to the streets and they protest and they fight for their rights as a result. So that's exactly what we mean. So in a way, with social stratification, we say it, in a way, it ties all your theoretical perspectives together in making you understand how does the acquisition or accessibility to resources inform a person's a person's sense of agency or sense of behavior as a member of society, which takes us to the relationship then that exists. Now we said social stratification just looks at broader arrangements of society. Now, in a structural sense, we say now that it's important to understand the relationship then between structure and agent. And what does that mean? Because this has been a very important debate in sociology that assists us in understanding how small groups in society are influenced by broader society, and then how a broader society can be affected by these small groups of society. And we define then agency as the ability to act independent of structure, and we define structure as the pre-existing social arrangements that shape and constrain behavior. So what does that mean? For example, takes us to the example we made last week, and the question was, why do students protest? So in that, you'll see that the people that we explored, just to go back to the previous slide, the people that are protesting there are young people, as you can see in the picture. And since they are young people, it means that we are saying that in this case, since they are able to take it to the street and voice out their concerns, we say that they have a sense of agency because they are able to act independent of structure. They are able to say, because we have these issues, we are not going to be allowed, we are not going to allow rather the society or government or institutions that exist in society to bottle us inside this container. We are going to come out of the container and voice out our views to say that we need an equal chance at education, just like people of higher social status. So in this case, we say these individuals have what? They have agency. They have a sense of agency because they are able to act against the pre-existing social arrangements of society. And those social arrangements are as a result, for example, in South Africa, they are as a result of our apartheid past. So as a result of this, there has been a lot of inequalities within the education institutions. So in you understanding the sociological perspective, you need to be able to look at how individuals in their smaller groups, in their small scale, are able to influence broader society, and how does broader society influence the individuals. And for you to be able to do that, you need to apply your sociological imagination, which is something that we're going to talk about in-depthly in Saturday's tutorial. So we'll be looking at the relationship between personal experience and wider society, and the opposite, of course, or vice versa. So we'll be looking at how do individuals sort of influence wider society, and how does wider society influence the individual, and how does that then help us in understanding how public issues can lead to personal troubles, and how do personal troubles in a way lead to public issues in broader society. So we'll explore this in Saturday's session. Please make sure that you have done the third reading for this week before you attend the tutorial, so that you gain from it. Yeah. So remember, guys, the sociological imagination, that is work by our guy there called C. Wright Mills, and he made us really understand the best way to think in a sociological acceptable manner. And since we are on C. Wright Mills, I think it's necessary for us to just look at now some brief history in the emergence of sociology. Where are all of these ideas we discussed today come from? Yeah, so who started being involved in the conversation with regards to these theories, and how do they, how can we rather use their theories in trying to understand education as an institution, since we are looking at the sociology of education. Okay, so the major theories that we talk about is Marx. So Marx is on your left there. The guy is called Karl Marx. And then we also think about Weber. So he also came with some great contributions, and with that we're going to look at briefly the next part. And we also talk about Durkheim. Durkheim also brought some contributions to the study of sociology. So let's start and let's just go back in time and look at them in order. So the first guy we talk about is Auguste Comte. And Auguste Comte, guys, this is like a historical view of the people. So I'll just share some interesting ideas on them and what work they did and how does it contribute to sociology. So I will just quickly move through this section. Okay, so the person we look at is Auguste Comte, and we say this is the guy that gave us, so that came up with the word sociology. He named this subject, so he's considered the founder of the subject. And his major works are, he wrote a book called Plan of the Scientific Operations, necessary for reorganizing societies, where the book just briefly looks at the implications of scientific processes in the organization of society. So at first, sociology was known as social physics, because it was viewed, or rather ideologies at the time were saying that we need to study sociology the same way as we do in the natural sciences, the same way as we study the natural sciences using the scientific method and all of that. So that's what the book is about. And we also have the book Positive Philosophy. It's a very interesting one again. So you remember there was a quiz question last week that asked you to tell us, I don't know who came up with positivism and anti-positivism. So that is discussed in the book there. And remember, guys, positivism again is a natural science philosophical view that says knowledge can be destroyed. When we find new knowledge, it replaces pre-existing knowledge. And the views that were coined at the time were to say that when we theorize new ideas about society, they automatically replace the older ideas that pre-exist in society. And then we also have the book Systems of Positive Polity. And that book also just builds up on the ideas on positivism by Auguste Comte. And the next guy, or rather the next last lady we talk about is Harriet Matu. Her contributions are largely felt in Britain, the United States, and she was a scholar who advocated for the idea that we should try to improve society and not just study it. So you are saying, in a way, she was introducing new ideas to this, to say we don't just want to understand society, but we want to solve society's problems through the use of the data or the knowledge that we gather from it. And she was also famous for translating Comte's work into English, because it was not in English at first. So, and you notice that her work was, in a way, more applicational, looking at how do we apply sociology, because the book, first book she wrote is Society in America, which just looks at the applications of the gathered sociological knowledge in improving America. And the other one is How to Observe Morals and Manners. So this was based on her research and findings.
Of losing and turn it into a joke.
Can you mute yourself?
There is nobody that wants to discuss themselves. There is nobody.
Someone watching a show or an interview, please mute yourself. Okay, yeah. So you notice that the book really looks at the How to Observe Morals and Manners, looks at her research into understanding the arrangements of society or the applications of how sociology can be used in understanding society. And then we talk about the famous guy there, Emile Durkheim, who was a French sociologist, and he came up with the functionalist paradigm and told us that came with the term on social fact, and said that those are partners' ways of acting, thinking, and feeling that exist outside any one individuals, but that exert social control over each person. So this guy defined what social facts are, and then he actually looked at how do they influence how an individual acts, and also wrote a lot on social solidarity. There's a book on the mechanics of social mechanical solidarity, in which it defined as traditional societies where people share beliefs and values and they form common activities. And he said we also have an organic society that involves diverse divisions of labor in society. And we talked about anomie, which is a condition in which social control becomes ineffective as a result of the loss of shared values and a sense of purpose in society. So in this case, these concepts that he coined seek to further broaden our understandings on functionalism, to say society is structured in certain ways, and there are different forms of social solidarity that exist across these institutions that exist. So he wrote books on that, the division of labor, suicide, and rules of sociological method. You can check them out, just look at what he studied. And we think about Herbert Spencer, who applied principles of biology to society. And this is actually the guy that started introducing this debate. Is sociology a natural science or social science? Because he showed how biological principles actually applies to sociology. He referred to Darwin's theories of evolution and looking at how do they assist us in understanding the structuralization of society. So if you did biology, you might have heard the statement survival of the fittest. So this was a phrase that was made by Herbert Spencer. It wasn't made by Charles Darwin. And that's why one nickname given to Herbert Spencer is that he came up with, he came up with social Darwinism in a way. Let's understand how conflict, how our fight for resources actually influences how we act in society. And the next guy we think about is Karl Marx. Commonly, his work and theories are known as Marxism. So he came up with a lot of theoretical perspectives on that. He was a German economist and philosopher, and him being an economist and philosopher made him to come up with conflict theory perspective. And unlike Durkheim, whose focus was on social order, remember Durkheim came up with structural functionalism. So Karl Marx looked at the role of economic conflict between capitalist class, which are known as the bourgeoisies, and the working class, which are known as the proletariat. And he looked at how will us resolving the debate between the bourgeoisies and the proletariat lead to social change, advancements in society, and a state of equilibrium, while Durkheim was saying that we need to understand how people are structured in institutions, and after understanding how they're structured in institutions, we need to resolve the problems in institutions so that we ensure that we maintain a state of equilibrium with social order or in society. And then he also called the concept of alienation, which is, it defines the feeling of powerlessness or estrangement from one's work, from other people, and from oneself, which is exactly relevant in him explaining that the working class or the proletariat may feel economically alienated from society, and as a result, we are going to have conflict developing in order to try and restore social order, leading to social change in society. So if you want to check out his book where he explores all of these ideas, Karl Marx, Capital, a critical analysis of capitalist production, and so that's the book he focuses on his sociological contribution in conflict theory as a result. Okay, and then we think about Max Weber or Weber. Max Weber or Weber, up to you how you want to call it, but the correct pronunciation is Weber. So because it's in German. This guy was a German social scientist. He emphasized that sociology should be value-free, which means research should be conducted in a scientific manner and should exclude the researcher's personal values and economic interests. So he said we need to be objective in studies. Our morals. So in a way, he was saying that let's move away from attaching social effects, morals and values, and try to study society in a objective manner. Hence, sociology is a scientific study. So that's one of his contributions on that. And he believed that bureaucracies were becoming increasingly oriented towards routine administration and specialized division of labor. That's a political view of some sort to say that the politicians or political bureaucracies at the time on society are more leaning on controlling how labor is distributed instead of ensuring that we maintain social order. So he said that rational bureaucracy and not class struggle was the most significant factor in determining social relationships between people in society. That's exactly what he said. We shouldn't focus on classifying people, but we should focus on our actual relationships as members of society, so that we are structured in a more organized and peaceful manner. And another American scholar, W.E.B. Du Bois, he used community studies to underscore the significance of race in American society. So that's like an applicational one. So he applied sociology and in American society, and believed that sociologists should be involved in social reform and as well as academic study. So in a way, it supports Harriet Matu's views to say that we shouldn't just focus on gathering knowledge, but we should look at ways that we can apply this knowledge for social change or social reform societies. And then we have George Herbert Mead, next guy, who was an American philosopher, psychologist, and sociologist. So the person's work was more on the social sciences, really. Social sciences. Called the term generalized other. So we looked at how the norms, values, and attitudes and expectations of people in general influence structuralization of people in society. He looked at, in a way, this is a person that worked on the symbolic interactionism paradigm. So he looked at how individuals influence society, how individual persons' norms, values, attitudes, and expectations from other people influence how people behave in different structures and institutions or groups in society. He looked at the influence of an individual's role in how society as a whole functions. So he explains the difference between the I and the me. That's something that you're gonna have to understand and read about in theoretical perspective in 2 weeks' time. He says that the I is making reference to the active, spontaneous, and reflective part of the individuals, and the me refers to the attitudes and demands of others and the awareness of those demands. So it's a pretty philosophical one, but we will break it down when we do symbolic interactionism in detail. So yeah, so those are the people, guys. This is a summary of the people we are looking at August Comte, Harriet Matu, Jane Addams, Herbert Spencer, Karl Marx, W.E.B. Du Bois. So those, all of them are categorized as early European sociological scholars to study in sociology. So that was, I think that's the end of our historical section on who came up with what, when, and came with which theory or perspective. Those are the people that we will study in sociology this year and next year in sociology of education. Now, maybe an important question then now to ask is, how did they come up with the theories that they came up with? How did they gather data for their theories? Takes us to looking at methodological approaches. So remember we said sociology is a scientific study, which means follows scientific methodologies, and they are categorized into two. So since it's a scientific study, it involves this cycle that you see on the side. We have deductive science, which leads to the formation of theories, and we have inductive science, which is based on observations. Now, when we are working with the research to try and find or gather information on this, either employ quantitative research or qualitative research. And quantitative research is based on the goal of scientific objectivity and focused on data that can be measured numerically, while qualitative research uses interpretive description rather than statistics to analyze underlying meanings and patterns of social relationships. Now, this is like very complex in nature. So since we did readings and did the quiz in week 1, can we explain what's the difference between the two in simple terms, quantitative research and qualitative research? Just get some hands quickly. So what's the difference between the quantitative research and qualitative research? Yes, guys, you can unmute and speak. Or should I choose people again? Yes, Sikolile, are you speaking? Your mic is dancing here.
I'm having a network problems.
Oh, okay.
But I'm
Okay. Trompo, can choose one. Trompo, can you please answer that for us? Just get different views. Trompo, Nomvelo Dlamini, Kazmir, Amahle, and Gwanda. Yeah, those 5. Can you get difference between quantitative and qualitative in your views, guys? I know it's the same thing, but I'm pretty sure you have understanding of it. What's the difference between the two? Can the people mentioned please unmute and speak?
Can I try to answer that?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'm gonna choose equalitative research.
Okay.
So in sociology, it is the use of statistics. That's the quantitative research. And then in the qualitative research in sociology seeks to understand human behavior. So quantitative deals with numbers. Mm.
Okay, quantitative deals with, yes, we got that. Quantitative deals with numbers, qualitative deals with, she said individuals, I think, understanding individual people. That's what you said, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Can we get another one?
Hello?
Yes, yes.
Yes, I only know quantitative research. Hello?
Yes, you can share it.
What I know about quantitative research is that it focuses on testing theories and hypothesis endings of women, and that this girl that just responded now, that it focuses on or it's mainly expressed maybe in numbers, graphs, and tables. I only know that.
Thank you for that. Yeah, so it deals with data. We have another one. Think Lungile, your hand was up.
Yes, quantitative, like they said, there's use of numeric forms and surveys from what I've read. And qualitative uses individuals. So they focus on individuals, small groups, and communities.
Yeah, thank you for that. So we have a list then of different types of research methods. Can we choose then? Is it qualitative or quantitative? Is using a survey qualitative or quantitative?
A survey is quantitative.
Because
from what I've read that it's quantitative. I don't know why. It uses numbers as well.
Yes, that's exactly why it's quantitative. And secondary data analysis. So we have gathered data then and statistics. So you don't practically gather it yourself, but you are asked to analyze it. So is that a quantitative or qualitative method? Data is gathered, you are asked to analyze it. Is that qualitative or quantitative?
Qualitative.
Qualitative or quantitative?
Qualitative.
Lots of people are saying tative, guys. Which is qualitative? Yes, and why is it qualitative? Goes back to this. So we use interpretive descriptions. So you are analyzing the statistics, or rather the data. So they were not specific to what kind of data. Right? So you are analyzing the data. So that is qualitative. And what is content analysis? Is it quantitative or qualitative?
Qualitative.
Qualitative. Are you
Yes.
saying qualitative?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's correct, because again it's interpretive in nature. And what about field research? In terms of interviews, field research, is it quantitative or qualitative? Qualitative. So because you are interpreting, you gather data and you interpret it. Participant observation.
I think it's qualitative.
There's someone who is whispering. Be confident. Is it quantitative or qualitative?
Qualitative.
Qualitative. Yeah.
Yes, it's qualitative. And focus groups. So looking at a specific group and just analyzing their behavior.
Qualitative.
Qualitative. Photo voice. Load shedding.
Photo voice. Oh my God.
Yes, what is photo voice? Maybe let's start there. Can you?
I assumed it's qualitative because it falls under all these things that falls under field research. They all belong to one cluster.
Yes, that's exactly all I needed. So put in something that you don't know with their own people. So that is that. It means that all field research methods are qualitative methods of research or of gathering data. And we use them in sociology to gather information and make our theories. And then what about experiments? And what sort of experiment will that be? Experiments qualitative or quantitative? Someone whispering again. Quanti or quali?
Quanti.
Quanti.
Quanti, right? Because you're gonna gather numerical data from that experiment. It's usually the case. Remember, with an experiment, you use certain tools, and those tools usually gather statistics in a form of. Then what about spatial?
Can I ask?
Yes.
Is it possible that the experiment can be both quantitative and qualitative in the sense that now that you've okay, I'm not sure if I'm overthinking this, but since you've gathered all your information and your numeric, and then one asks you to give an analysis of what you've observed, and wouldn't one be able to classify an experiment also under the qualitative perspective?
Qualitative.
I'm just asking. Yes, I'm just asking. Is it possible, or am I just overthinking it?
Yeah, you're not overthinking it. It's possible. And why is it possible? Remember, if you do an experiment, that's like a primary data collection. Then when you analyze the data, then that becomes your secondary data analysis. So you're analyzing that data, and it forms as your qualitative research method. Can be both.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that. So good that we're thinking about this openly. And what about spatial analysis or GIS? Qualitative or quantitative? Spatial analysis or geographical information system? Qualitative or quantitative? Tricky one. Okay, so let's break it down. Kind of what do we do when we work with the GIS? So there are different ways to look at it. So in GIS, we look at different ways to gather data, right? So that's a geographical information system. And one of the ways that we use is us as people going to do questionnaires and interviews with people. So that's just one method of doing it. Another one will be to actually work with the data from that geographical region and then try to analyze it and layer it into different methods. We call that what's this, data layering, to try and classify different sets of information in different ways. And again, we try to represent the information using objects, pictures, imagery, and statistics, which will be graphically. So out of everything I mentioned, would you say GIS is qualitative or quantitative or both qualitative and quantitative?
I think it's both.
Okay, any different response? Because we are mainly in this meeting, we should be speaking. And as people are with us spiritually.
Quantitative.
Quantitative. Okay, someone said both. Someone is saying quantitative. Do you have a different one again? I think I should put it in the quiz. I'll put it in the quiz. And if we don't want to talk. You reflect on it. We won, yeah, bo? Yeah. So let's just leave it like that. Qualitative, quantitative, or both. You'll find it in next week's quiz. Okay, let's look at the last question then. In what ways can we argue that sociology is a natural science? And in what ways, let's start there. In what ways can we argue to say sociology is a natural science? Remember at the beginning of the session, we had food for thought and we asked, sociology a natural science or a social science? So in what ways can we argue to say that sociology is a natural science? I also want us to tell us, I want you guys to tell us in what ways have some sociologists argued to say it falls under the social sciences. As we should be popping like popcorns now. It should be easy to answer this question. In what ways can we say it's the natural? It falls under the natural sciences, and in what ways can we say it falls under the social sciences? You can choose one and tell us. We have 10 minutes remaining.
Can I try?
Yes, please.
I think it's because sociologists conduct researches on what influences the behavior of people.
And that is that. Which part does it fall under? That argument, natural science or social science?
Natural sciences.
Natural science. Okay, interesting one. Do we have a counter argument? Anyone? So it says it can be called the natural science because it studies the behavior of people.
No. So it falls under social sciences.
Social science. Oh, okay. Still surprised. Yes, falls under social science because of that. Can we get a different view? As I gave you in 2 sessions, I gave you clues to this. Let's hear. Athi sekugula nina manje. Guys, let's hear. "26 people, all silent." It's more than 26 people because there are people that are groups in their room. Let's hear, guys. Oh, so I think I have to resort to
Can I talk?
Magdalene. Yes,
Okay, can I try to?
yes.
Yeah, it's
The
Magdalene.
next. Okay, and so Tatus Kolil.
Yeah, I'm gonna just say what Focus second to said. And it he said that we can use the scientific methods that are usually used in natural science to study sociology or society. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's how we can say that sociology is natural science.
Okay, because it uses the scientific method. Okay. Fair enough. Skolile?
I think it's fall under social science because at first you said sociology, it's study of human life, of social groups. That's why I think.
Fair enough. So we always use the word social. Social interaction, social action, social facts, social activities, social, not natural. That's another clue guys have been giving. Sonwabile? Sonwabile?
Yes, Mr. Peter.
Natural science or social science?
Natural science.
Okay. Reasons?
Natural reason. Mr. Peter. Both.
It can't be both. Both kanjani? Okay, amahle. While you think about it, amahle.
Mr. Peter, can I ask something?
Yes.
Are we choosing here whether it is sociology, natural science, or social science?
Yes,
And
you are
maybe I'm not
choosing.
under how
Yes.
social science.
Yeah, you are choosing and you tell us why you chose kanjani. It's you've done readings and have seen stuff, so you need to come up with your conclusion there. Something that's still debated. Understanding sociology, we start by resolving that debate. Because you notice that some of your colleagues still think it's a natural science, some still think it's a social science. Just need to conclude that debate. So we move on to theory. Okay, I see things have become very tense. I see Lamule end up. So we say that my teams is reacting. I don't know what's going on. Okay, so we say sociology is a social sciences, guys, and a lot of reasons behind that. Number one, if you look at studies related to it, they all fall under the social sciences. For example, we look at how history influences members of society, and history as a subdiscipline falls under the social sciences. We look at how the economy influences individuals, and economics falls under the social sciences. We look at how politics affect individuals in society. So that's why we say it is also a social science as a result of that. Because political science falls under the social sciences. Look at how geography our understanding of society and geography again falls under the social sciences. So based on all of those, or rather based on some of those reasons, we say it falls under the social sciences. I hope you understand that point. Now, it brings us to the major question then. Understanding sociology, what does it mean for us in the present and in the future? I don't know if you guys can still hear me. My Teams is acting up here. Okay. So now, yeah, if you look at all that chart, it shows you studies in the social sciences, and sociology is part of them. Because we say it's in the social sciences, even though it applies the scientific method, but it doesn't apply the explicit scientific method that says you need to observe, you need to do an experiment. And when you need to observe, you need to do a hypothesis or have an hypothesis and have an experiment, and then look at your results and form a conclusion. And as a result, you're going to have a theory or after that. It doesn't work like that because we are working with humans. They are autonomous beings. They are not restricted by strict rules or strict theoretical rules. Goes back to what we said at the start of the presentation to say, sociologists look at sociology as an approach instead of subject matter, as a perspective instead of strict theory. Because we are studying humans, humans may act in different ways. That's why we say, since they act in different ways, let's zoom out and look at general noticeable trends and patterns in society. And hence it falls under the social sciences because we focus more on the social, on human interactions than in the explicit following of research methods, which means in its nature, all sociological knowledge is gathered through qualitative means, because we care about what people think, what people have to contribute to our understanding society than just mere statistics that are based on strict numbers. Though we acknowledge that those statistics somewhat give us a certain gaze into how society is structured. Hence, we say qualitative and quantitative research are both important for our understanding of society. And then we ask then, what does that mean for our understanding of sociology in the present or the future? Notice that now we look at how sociology focuses on wicked problems, problems as a result of wicked people in society. And what do we mean by that? Example, oppressive people. Look at how now does power lead to members of society acting wicked against other members of society, and how does that then affect our understanding of society? And we also look at how, as we are living in the future, or as we are growing in the field of sociology, we apply other fields to our understanding of society. And again, we think about the sophisticated methodological approaches that are used, like this big data, massive data, like the websites, world statistics, they give you real-time statistics of changes in the world. So as technology advances, it changes how data or information is gathered about the world as a whole, which sort of creates threats to the credibility of sociology because of this excessive technology. In a way, as we move towards the future, we do not get raw data about the world. In a way, it's technocentric now, and we know that technology may have its flaws. That's what we are worried about as we move towards the future, of course. Now, then, in summary, what then is the nature of sociology? So the first point, and this is an extract from Robert Epstein sociology book, The Social Order. So it summarizes perfectly the nature of sociology, because that's the theme we've been doing for the past 2 weeks. So these are the takeaway points. So number one is that sociology is an independent science. And why do we say so? Simply because even though we say it emerges from the social sciences, but it has become a very independent subdiscipline that follows its strict methods, there are strict boundaries to what information is of value. Just on the objective view on society, you see that. So it has become an independent science because of that. Number two, sociology is a social science, not a physical science or a natural science. And we say that because even though sociology is a science, it's independent, but we say it belongs to the family of social sciences and not to the family of physical sciences or natural sciences, which means there was a change in its name. Remember, Spector called it social physics at some point. So we disregard that name because sociology is falling under the family of social sciences. It concentrates its attention on men, their social behaviors, their social activities, their social life. We look at how other subdisciplines that are in the social sciences influence sociology as a study, such as how history, political science, economics, philosophy, anthropology influences our understanding of the field. And again, it deals with the social universe either than astronomy or the natural universe, such as what happens in the physical sciences. So we look at the social universe instead of the natural universe. So it distinguishes it from the natural sciences such as astronomy, physics, chemistry, geology, mathematics, and other physical sciences. And number three, sociology is a categorical and not a normative discipline. And what do we mean by that? We mean that sociology confines itself to statements about what is and not what should be or what should ought to be. So we are not predictive. We look at what is in existence. So we are categorical to say we care about 1, 2, 3, something that exists, instead of being normative to say we are studying or predicting society might behave in this way. Society ought to behave in this way. So we care about existent things. So, and why do we do that? Because we are ethically neutral as sociologists. We disregard morals, good and evil, because if we are to create content on what is right and wrong, good and evil, what is moral and immoral, we can, in a way, now become predictive or normative to say, so since they're doing this, it means that will be the result. And that's not what we do in sociology. We look at things that are inexistent. Number four, sociology is a pure science and not an applied science. And what does it mean? Does that mean? Remember that the main aim of pure sciences is to acquire knowledge. We are not bothered about whether the knowledge acquired is useful or can be put into use on the other hand or can be applied in certain fields. So we just acquire, we just saying, okay, let's zoom to society. This is how society is. Oh, these are the general perspectives and that we can come up from it. This is the best way. This is the best way to explain society. So we don't say, okay, now how do we apply this knowledge to that? So it's only now the subfields of sociology, such as sociology of education, that are applicational. So the subfield, sociology on itself, not applicational. We're just gathering knowledge. But in the sub-disciplines, because sociology of education, for example, we start applying to say, this is the general sociological theory. How do they apply to education? How do they apply to economics, politics? So in its nature, it's not applicational, but the sub-disciplines do apply the knowledge. Number 5, sociology is relatively an abstract science and not a concrete science. And this does not mean that sociology is an art and a science. Does it mean it is complicated and unduly difficult? It means that sociology is not interested in concrete manifestations of human events. It is more concerned with the form of human events and the patterns that exist from these events. So in a way, I'm saying we are not concerned with particular wars or revolution, but we are concerned with general wars and revolutions, general social phenomena and the types of social conflict. If you get what I mean. So that's why we say it's an abstract science, because it is looking at society in a generic sense, in a centered or a centric sense. And number 6, to summary, is that sociology is a generalizing and not a particularizing or individualizing science. Remember, we look at how broader society is structured and not really concerned about individual to individual problems. It is only when we apply the sociological imagination where we try to understand personal troubles in relation to public issues and how public issues may lead to personal troubles. That's what we mean. And number 7, the second last point, sociology is concerned with, which means that it is concerned with its general inquiry into how society is structured and less on the applicational side of things. And finally, sociology is both a rational and an empirical science. And these are, in a way, approaches to scientific knowledge. And we say empiricism is based on experience and facts that while rationalism stresses the reason for those observations, the theories that can result from logical inference to those observed events. So sociology in its nature cares about the experiences and the rational thoughts that can be gathered from it. That's why Kant, Immanuel Kant, one of the people you're going to come across with, asset in its nature. Yeah, so sociology in its nature cares about facts and comes up with theories based on those facts that are descent. So that is all, guys, for me today. This is a list of references for today's session and week one session. We look forward to meeting you guys. So the rest of the sessions that are coming will be very applicational in nature. So you guys are gonna do most of the talking. I believe I am done introducing sociology to you guys. Fine. I believe you are fine. Are you fine? So we're now gonna look at how do we apply different concepts and all of that. Do we have any questions or comments? Let's get that. Questions and comments? You can just unmute and speak. Even a comment to say, okay, I now understand 1, 2, 3. So I think I took your extra 15 minutes. It's 13 past. Let's just use a minute to do that. Are we fine, guys? Unmute and tell us you're fine.
Hi, say, can
I
you
have a question. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to say something. I think sociological imagination and perspective basically almost mean the same thing, because when you imagine, you think of something, and when you have a perspective, you actually think of something based on what you saw, don't you think?
That's exactly the kind of view we need. Yeah, so that's 100% correct. So in a way, what this means is the sociological perspective allows you to think about broader society, while sociological imagination allows you to imagine how individuals are affected by broader society. So in a way, sociological imagination is the sociological perspective, but the perspective is not the imagination, if you get what I mean. They are interrelated with each other. The only difference is, are you including the individuals in that? And if you're including individual problems, individuals of society, then that is what we call you using an imagination, because you're trying to put yourself in their shoes to understand how they act the way they act. While with the perspective, we are saying that, okay, we don't care about individuals for now. We care about general patterns in society and sociological perspective. That's why we have these theories that are used to explain that. So the one is the other, basically, as you said. Are you fine? Yeah, I'll use one.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I'm just gonna be quick. When just trying to understand when you mean extended definition, and I understand the definition of extended definition, but the application of it is what I'm trying to clear out or trying to understand. So when you're talking about extended definition, you would perhaps state your definition, right, in a more simpler or a more in a definition way, right? And then the use of diction and that you use within this definition, do you use those to be able to expand on what you understand about about sociology as a whole? So, say for example, like how you defined it as a scientific study of human social interaction. So, with that statement stated as it is, would one need to now, to allow for an extended definition to take place, use those specific words? So, normally create some form, not necessarily, but some form of an analysis in such a way that you are actually expanding on what each specific phrase means within that definition, and then you are now expanding it more to now for one to actually be able to give that sense of a much broader definition, and showing their understanding using those using that limited definition that they're given. I don't know if I'm making sense or if you're grasping my question.
Yes, I will say you got it correctly. That's 100%. That's when you can say an extended definition derives from you expanding on what the limited definition means. So, for example, if you are saying sociology is a scientific study of human social interactions and social forces which mold human behavior, and that's your limited definition. The extended definition sense, they are saying that by scientific study, we mean that we are employing scientific methodologies to how we study society. By human social interactions, we mean we're looking at how people are categorized in at different levels, from the micro to the meso to the macro sense, from individual groups to, from individual relationships to groups or communities, and to national or global society. So from that, you see, you're expanding. From this limited, we are trying to give us an understanding of the constituencies of this limited definition to try and give us a broader perspective of what you're talking about. And we say it involves social forces. You tell us what those social forces are. What do you mean by social forces, and how does that then mold human behavior? So you are, in a way, expanding thoroughly to your limited definition. That's why that's why they can say write an essay on that, because you can actually write a full essay on defining sociology, because the defining words or the words you use in defining it are sociological concepts that have different or complex meanings. Is that clear?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That is that. I think everyone is. I think we are fine, guys. Thanks for attending, and the night. Stop the recording.